We have some additional breaking news to bring to you right now. We're coming on the air as former Senator and Vice Presidential nominee Joe Lieberman has passed away. No Labels political party confirming to ABC News that the 82-year-old has died. He was also the founding chair of No Labels. A statement from his family saying that he died this afternoon following complications from a fall. The Connecticut lawmaker had a career that spanned some 24 years in the Senate. I'm sure you remember Al Gore tapped Lieberman as his running mate in the 2000 presidential election, making him the first Jewish American to have been nominated for VP on a major party's ticket. I want to bring in our ABC News political director, Rick Klein, for more on this news and news of his passing. So, Rick, as this just comes into our newsroom here, what are you hearing from your colleagues there as you know that this sends a ripple effect through both political parties here?
Yeah, look, it's a very sad day, and you mentioned both political parties, and I would add to that the third party that he was trying to prop up in No Labels. He was a doggedly, fiercely independent man, and he had deep friendships in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. He had a famous break with Democrats shortly after, just a few years after, almost becoming vice president along with Al Gore. He broke with party orthodoxy over the Iraq War, ended up saving his Senate seat as an independent and endorsing John McCain back in 2008, and then coming full circle now to work on that third-party bid. So he was kind of a vanishing breed in Washington, a centrist Democrat. He always said that the Democratic Party left him more than he left it, who had deep friendships in the Republican Party and values that were shared across both parties. And I'll tell you, he was very active up till the end, until this fall yesterday. He was giving interviews just even over the weekend about this effort to get No Labels a ticket over the finish line to pursue a vision that he saw as sorely lacking in today's politics. So this is a very sad day, and a man that leaves a huge legacy as a trailblazer and of someone who cut across party grains in deeply divided times.
Yeah, I mean, to see someone shift from the Democratic Party to become, essentially a cheerleader as well for the Republican Party. You mentioned John McCain there as well. That was a highlight that I remember. But tell me a little bit more about, some of the trips that he took, the international trips, Iraq, Afghanistan.
Yeah, he was someone that wanted to go and learn on his own. And I think the foreign policy hawkish streak that he developed was born of firsthand experience. Members of Congress often go on these trips. They're highly choreographed, highly produced. But he would go on them toward the end of his career in the Senate, along with John McCain and Lindsey Graham. They called themselves the Three Amigos, and represented different parts of the country, different political backgrounds, but were extraordinarily close and often saw exactly eye to eye on foreign policy, would put out joint statements with the three of them that carried just an uncommon heft from a United States senator. He came to believe strongly in the mission of the Iraq War and that kind of hawkish foreign policy, a fierce defender of Israel as well. I think it's in foreign policy that he will be best remembered for his influence in the Senate, but it was domestic policy, environmental issues, abortion rights that kind of brought him to prominence in the first place. And what earned him that ticket on the ticket with Al Gore, what earned him that nod was in part he was one of the few Democrats who would come out publicly during the Monica Lewinsky scandal and criticize the sitting president of the United States in Bill Clinton. That was the part of Joe Lieberman that I think a lot of people believe led Al Gore to think this is the right person I want with me. They were kind of a mismatched pair, very close at the time, but obviously grew quite far apart over the years after that ideologically. But I do think that the legacy of independence is what he would want to define himself.
A legacy of independence and working across the aisle, certainly a message that many in Congress are maybe turning an ear to right now. It remains to be seen. Rick Kleiner, thanks to you. I want to now bring in our ABC contributor and former New York Congressman John Katko for more on this. And John, as news started coming in of Senator Lieberman's death, I could actually hear you on the phone, and I could hear you saying that you had gotten the news. And I know that this hits you hard. You've described him as a true gentleman in the past.
Yeah, he was such a great guy, and it's just a devastating news to hear about. The best thing I could say about Joe Lieberman's professional career is that he had a firm grasp on the lost art of looking at things from another person's point of view and putting principles ahead of party instead of party ahead of principles. And, in this modern age, that's why I think he gravitated towards No Labels and what No Labels is trying to do with a third-party run. He realized, and he was a leader of this realization, that principle instead of party is far more important in this country, and we need to get back to that. And I'm devastated to hear this, but I'm also thankful I got to know him a bit, and also very proud of the legacy he's left behind. And if more people would follow what he did, Washington would be a much, much better place.
And he was 82 years old in his passing. And John, I'm wondering if you can elaborate for us a little bit on his involvement with the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah, well, he was intimately involved in Homeland Security, and he was very much involved with understanding the international scene as well, and how that impacts Homeland Security here in the United States. And he didn't look at it from a party point of view. He looked at it from a keeping America safe point of view. And he really helped advance what happened with Homeland Security in the post 9/11 world. And thank God he was there. He was always just whatever he sunk his teeth into, he was just a steady guiding hand and a very respectful and incredibly intelligent person. So it's a bad loss for our country. There's no question about it.
It certainly is, and as he leaves the legacy here of reaching across the aisle, and as you pointed out, John, looking at things from different points of view. He was a VP at one point, but it's my understanding that even John McCain had considered him as well. Wouldn't that have been something?
It would have been great for this country, and it's the kind of things we need to think more about. And quite frankly, I took a very nonpartisan point of view in Congress when I was there for 8 years, and I got beat up pretty good by my own party quite a bit for doing so. But guys like Joe really inspired me, because he didn't just talk the talk; he walked the walk. And what he did after leaving the Democratic Party, because he had disagreements that were serious, and he ran on, he became an independent. Well, that's okay. That's because he was following his heart and following his principles, and that's something I tried to do when I was in Congress, and I think if more people did that, it would be a much better place. There's no question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, can you tell me more about his involvement with the No Labels Party and how strongly he felt about that?
Well, sure. I mean, he was a driving force behind No Labels, and he gave it credibility, and he gave it street credibility, if you will, in Washington. And it's gaining steam. No Labels. People may not realize this. They're on the ballot in 22 states for this presidential election, and they're in the process of selecting a candidate, and it's going to be someone likely, it's going to be Republican and a Democratic vice president. So what McCain thought of, we're actually going to do with respect to No Labels, and it could have an impact. And don't forget, Abraham Lincoln won with 40% of the popular vote in 1860. There was 5 candidates, and so No Labels could make this happen. And maybe this will be the final drive, the narrative of what his legacy was, could be the final drive to get on the ballot in the other states and to really make this a movement, because I think our country needs it right now. And I think what he did with No Labels and help push it and get it on the map is going to, was going to be a big part of his legacy.
Absolutely. An exclamation point to a very storied 24-year career in the Senate. Absolutely. John Katko, thank you so much for sharing your insight and experience with us. I also want to bring in former Lieutenant for the United States Coast Guard Reserve, Don Mihalik. He was Secret Service agent who provided security for Lieberman as well. Don, thank you so much for being back here with us. So it's my understanding that you were part of his protection in 2000. So this would have been when he was the running mate with Al Gore, yeah?
Yeah, it's a sad loss, Senator Lieberman. When we covered him as a candidate, he was, as everybody has said, he was a gentleman. He was, his family was very nice. So it's a sad loss for America and a sad loss from us. I had the opportunity to protect him on a couple of occasions, and it's sad to hear of his passing.
Absolutely. And are you able to share, if you're comfortable, any moments that you remember as part of that protection service?
I just remember that all of our interactions with him and his family were very positive, and he was a gentleman through and through. What you saw was what you got, and he was as kind as perceived, but he also was a realist. So when you dealt with him, he was pragmatic in many ways. It was a pleasure to be around him. It was a pleasure to protect him, and it was a pleasure to be around his family.
I so appreciate you sharing these stories with us, Don, and of course we appreciate your service as well. We'll be checking in with Don and John throughout the day, but I want to bring back our political director, Rick Klein, for more on the passing of Senator Lieberman here. Rick, I know that a number of prominent politicians are now weighing in on this, and again, we talk about the support that he has. It's on both sides of the aisle, right, but it far reaches, especially considering his prominence in bringing this third party, and I like the term unity ticket to the forefront of politics.
Yeah, and look, I covered Joe Lieberman shortly after his presidential bid when I was a reporter for the Boston Globe. I tracked his political evolution, his drift away from the Democratic Party. I was actually in Hartford with covering his campaign the day that he announced that he was abandoning the Democratic Party. It was an earthquake, a major moment, a seismic shift. In some ways, to me, it signaled a changing of an era, and we associate the extremes so much with the Republican Party today. That said, there were elements in the Democratic Party almost 2 decades ago that were basically feeling like they needed to kick people out of the party who didn't align with them on issues like the Iraq War. And that's what created the challenge to Lieberman that forced him ultimately to bolt from the party, run as an independent, and then ultimately even support John McCain against Barack Obama in 2008. Joe Lieberman was proud of that part of his legacy, and not because it meant that he gave up on the Democratic Party that he grew up in and that he came to public life around, but because it said to him that this was about principles, this was about something bigger, and he was free in his mind to support his good friend John McCain because he thought John McCain would be a better president than Barack Obama. It didn't matter the party labels. And as I said a moment ago, the fact that he could criticize Bill Clinton when he was president, even though he was a fellow Democrat, that was part of his political identity. He was proud of the place he had in history, cognizant of the fact that he was the first Jewish American to run for national office on a major party ticket like that. But it didn't define him in any way. And I think the way that he conducted himself over a long time in public life was truly not to care about the intricacies of a party label. He went and ran for president himself in 2004, really didn't get very far because the party, again, had changed so much. But it was a happy band and a very loyal group of staffers that worked with him over time. The centrist Democrat, the moderate Democrat that he defined himself around, there was a time where that looked like it was the future of the Democratic Party. Clearly, that is not the case, and clearly we see a Republican Party that's gone to its own extreme. And to some ways, you could see of Joe Lieberman as a casualty of that. In other ways, though, I think he was proud that he had an ability to see down a little bit further down the road and try to land where most voters, he thought, in Connecticut and across the country were actually living their lives.
Yeah, proud, and probably as well, in retrospect, a lot of people, it seems that they are agreeing with that potential pride that you talk about there. And in terms of course, he's a senator from Connecticut. We are getting statements here far and wide from political players across the country. The governor in Connecticut tweeting out, at least posting on social media, a statement in many words, though, saying that he was a man of integrity. And they talk about, they had disagreements politically, but that he was a man of principle and that he stuck by that. And while they could disagree, Rick, politically, once the arguments were over, they remained in contact, and that is, what they call one of the best traditions of democracy, and something that he certainly held up.
Yeah, and frankly, I don't see it anymore in the modern Senate. The fact that he had very close friendships with Republicans like John McCain and Lindsey Graham, and very close friendships with Democrats like Ted Kennedy and his fellow Connecticut Senator Chris Dodd. These were men and women who worked very closely together over many decades, and they often were on the same side, but they often were quite opposed. And the fact that he could go up against the movement that was the Obama movement inside the Democratic Party and hold his head high on it. There were a lot of Democrats that didn't want to be around him in polite company after that. But it wasn't something that Lieberman either did lightly or took lightly as part of his role or responsibility. He was proud of that. And I'll tell you that what No Labels has has sought to build, and it's still unclear as to whether they'll get the candidate, is something that people like Senator Lieberman think is the future. Whether this is the cycle or not, there's a lot of people in this country that don't identify strictly or strongly with either political party, whether they call themselves independents or moderates or just plain angry at the system. They see that future as something different, and that's what Lieberman was trying to build literally up through the end of his life.
And Rick, just before I let you go here, I'm reading a quote from an interview that he did, and he said, "Parties are failing the American people because they are rarely willing to do anything but attack for political reasons." It was an interview from Politico. That sort of really sums up here what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I think that sentiment is something that's shared by a lot of Americans at this moment. And again, we don't know what the cause or the solution might be to this, but we do know that Joe Lieberman was trying to work on it. And this is it's a stunning and tragic development. Again, he was so active up to the very end, giving interviews, trying to work on this project of his that he felt so deeply behind. The fact that he's passing at this moment seems to add an extra bit of sting, because it's a moment that needs people that see leadership in a broader light.
Yeah, absolutely. That needs his critical and unique thinking. Rick Klein, thank you so much. I know you're not going anywhere. We'll be checking in with you throughout the evening here as we talk about the passing of Senator Lieberman at the age of 82, the senator from Connecticut. I want to bring in our ABC News contributor and president of Next Gen America, Cristina Sinsoon Ramirez. Cristina, thank you for being here with us. And I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about, him really emerging forward-facing. It was in 2023 or so. As the forward-facing person in terms of this No Labels Party.
Yeah, I mean, former Senator Lieberman led a very long and active political career, and it didn't end when he exited the Senate or after he ran for vice president. And he's really led the way in the No Labels third party, which is a really middle-of-the-road, moderate party. And the question has been how much No Labels could impact also the Democratic Party and another election of Trump, which, of course, Joe Lieberman would have been opposed to. He lended a lot of name and credibility and fundraising prowess to No Labels for them to get as far as they are right now, being on the ballot in many states, not having yet named their presidential and vice presidential candidates. But the question will really be, how does No Labels survive long term without Joe Lieberman really leading the way and kicking doors open for the party?
Well, and actually, to follow up with you on that, Cristina, I mean, is that part of his legacy here? I mean, do you think that people will look in his passing as to follow in his footsteps, or are you concerned that without his leadership, it might struggle?
It might struggle without his leadership. It has yet to be determined. We are in a political moment where a lot of Americans see themselves as independents. I work with young people overwhelmingly. A large number of them say that they are independents, even though they vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. I think Joe Lieberman was trying to find a political home because the Democratic Party had really evolved past him. It had evolved to be a party that was had a different position on foreign policy, had a different position on many domestic issues from where he stood. And so that was a third party route he was trying to find. Mm-hmm. So, his legacy will be one that he stood up for what he believed in. And he left a party that he evolved past and that the party evolved past him as well.
All right, Cristina Sinsoon Ramirez, thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate that. I also want to bring in our ABC News contributor and SiriusXM radio host, Mike Muse, for more on this. And so, Mike, a lot of talk today with the passing of Senator Lieberman about where people fall politically and how when you stand up for what you believe in and you change parties, cross party lines, or work across the aisle, how is that viewed now down the line here? I think there's a lot of Americans, Mike, right now that feel like they don't fit in either party. And he was the one, trying to speak to them as early as 2023.
You're absolutely right. Just thinking about his life and his legacy, first want to give thoughts and prayers to his family and loved ones and friends at his passing. But Kana, I think this could be possibly a watershed moment for the independent movement. On my morning show, my radio show, I get calls every day. And the calls that I get every day is, Mike, do you think there is possibility for a third party? Do you think there's a possibility for an independent run? Mike, I don't like the Republican Party. Mike, I don't like the Democratic Party. I don't want to vote. I will exercise my right to vote, but I don't want to vote. I want a third party option. And when I'm discussing the framing of that, I've been saying that there's more of a possibility for a third party candidate to have success on a local and possible state level, but the difficulties of mounting a third party run on a presidential level and a federal level is extremely challenging due to the infrastructure that is needed and due to the costs associated with that. But there is momentum that is building for that. And this could be a possibility to have that moment that creates momentum going forward. What I do know, Kana, is in the world that we're living in today, with the ever-evolving moments of technology, the way that consumer behavior dynamics and patterns are changing, the ways that industry are changing from the automotive industry all the way from financial services. We have words now like fintech. We have words now like generative AI. What used to be the norm for so long just is becoming shattered as society continues to grow in this technological era that creates things at a faster rate. So I do think possibly with the passing of Senator Joe Lieberman that we could get to a third party candidate having success much sooner than we thought. But I do think, though, that this might add some momentum to that third party movement that is happening.
Absolutely. I think you're right about that, Mike. And thank you so much for weighing in on this with you. I really appreciate your time. Also, our ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the Los Angeles Times, LZ Granderson, is joining us for more. Again, here we're talking about the passing of Senator Lieberman, who died at 82 after complications with a fall. And look, LZ, he was a man of conviction, and he was willing to, essentially switch parties, but also willing to reach across the aisle and maintain important relationships politically, as he did personally as well, and throughout his life and throughout his education. But religion was a major factor for him. He didn't hide from that. He was an Orthodox Jew, a practicing Jew, and it was a driving force for him.
Absolutely. It was something that initially, at least my personal reporting, was something that attracted me to him because there were not a lot of Jewish people in Congress, certainly not one with a large megaphone like Joe Lieberman. But unfortunately, when you think about what happened with John McCain, as John McCain was mounting his campaign and was selecting a VP candidate, Kana, you mentioned that Joe Lieberman was mentioned as a possibility for John McCain. And in my reporting and the reporting of others, one of the reasons why he wasn't selected was because he was Jewish, and that there was concern that the ticket wouldn't get a significant support because of anti-Semitism within the party. And so while he certainly worked hard to try to, reach across the aisle, and honestly, I don't like saying reaching across the aisle. Joe Lieberman was someone who lived between the two aisles. He didn't reach from one side to the other. He reached both at the same time. But because of anti-Semitism in the country and anti-Semitism, thinking of anti-Semitism within the Republican Party, John McCain went with someone who was younger, who was female, more energetic in Sarah Palin, but clearly not nearly as accomplished and not nearly as beloved within national government like a Joe Lieberman, right? So you're sitting here and you're asking yourself, how much of Joe Lieberman's legacy was actually held back because of the small-mindedness of individuals within the Republican Party and within the Democratic Party, because he was a great man, he was a brilliant man, and he really did try to reach across both sides of the aisle. I remember talking with Governor John Huntsman, who was on the ground floor with No Labels, and he was looking for individuals just like Joe Lieberman because he needed people with more gravitas to build momentum behind it. And so my hope is that with his passing, instead of it, maybe leveling off and losing momentum, that it would remind people of the importance of independence and that voice does matter. There was someone by the name of Ross Perot, who did garner a lot of votes, not once, but twice. So it's not like a pie in the sky sort of conversation that we're having here. It's legitimate within all of our lifetimes. And Joe Lieberman was trying to get us to find that not to be a one-off, but to be a constant. And so my hope is that, one, that he's remembered as a great man. Two, he's remembered as a powerful politician. And three, he's being remembered as someone who tried to bring his entire self into his platform. And that included his faith.
Absolutely. LZ, well said, and in a way that only you can do that, LZ. I'm so thankful for you sharing your memories and your thoughts on all of this. Thank you, LZ. Our ABC News contributor and former New York Congressman John Katko is back with us to now remember Joe Lieberman here. So, John, I know that we've talked a little bit about his stance, and I think that there's a lot of Americans, as I mentioned to Mike Muse right now, that feel like they don't have a place in either party, and do they want to go to a third party? And they're asking themselves some of these questions. And when I look through where he stood on a lot of things, when you're talking about environmental issues, where he stood, he was very, very liberal on some of those issues. He really wanted to protect the environment, but then he was more conservative on some other issues, working very hard with Republicans to combat sexual violence and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, both parties have created pigeonholes that you've got to go into and not look out of. And Joe just didn't do that. He didn't espouse to that. And I think that's why this third party movement is real. Let's not forget that 2/3 of the people that support Trump are anti-Biden, and 2/3 of the people that support Biden are anti-Trump. And both of their negative numbers are in the high 50s or low 60s, which means nobody wants either one of them. And I think Mike is exactly right. And what LZ and all the others said, and Christina, people are dying to try and have an alternative. They're basically saying enough is enough. And I think Joe profoundly understood that and profoundly advanced that theory with respect to no labels. And that's why he poured his heart and soul into no labels towards the end of his life, because I think he realized, as did an awful lot of Americans, and probably a majority of Americans, that what we have now with this two-party system, it's not working very well when you have two candidates of this poor quality that are running for national election. And so I think his legacy is going to be that he was just a pragmatic guy, a guy who would refuse to be pigeonholed, and a guy who did the right things for his country. And God bless him.
Certainly, a lot of people consider him a man of high integrity, an extremely competent man at that as well. John Katko, thank you so much. I want to bring back in our ABC News political director, Rick Klein, who has been covering this news since it broke. And so, Rick, we've talked a lot about Senator Lieberman, the politician, and we've talked about his religion. We haven't talked about his personal life at all here for a moment. I'm wondering if you can take just a moment to reflect on that.
Yeah, I mean, his wife Hadassah, I think, introduced to the world in a really compelling way back in the 2000 campaign, is where you got to really get a sense of where he was and what it meant. His family back in Connecticut, something he tended to very, 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 very carefully. I saw quite a bit of the work he did as a senator from Connecticut and the constituent services that he tended to. He was very involved in the base closing commissions back in Connecticut. He had a certain celebrity to him, but realized that that's how you maintain that. I think the political lineage and the family lineage are all part of it. He was an enormously warm man, a lot of close relationships that he forged, close with his family as well. And I think that's part of what defined him. I just saw a statement from former President Bush, who of course campaigned against Al Gore and Joe Lieberman, and it was really a heartfelt and effusive statement talking about that warmth and the compassion that he brought to conversations, the good faith discussions that he would have. It was all defined by a man that really knew how to be a senator and a person.
And a person, and as I'm reading from the No Labels statement that they just released to us, Rick, he was a singular figure in American political life who always put his country before his party. So again, we are remembering now the late Senator Joe Lieberman, who died at 82 after complications with a fall. And he, of course, was the forward-facing person for the No Labels Party. And the No Labels Party also releasing the statement saying he was a beloved father and grandfather. He was a senator and a statesman. He was the founding chairman and moral center of the No Labels Party, and his unexpected passing is a profound loss.